10, 9,
8, 7.
This is the end of a cycle. Termination of the 13 Baktuns.
6.
The magnetic poles will reverse.
5, 4.
Asteroids are a wild card. Sometimes they can sneak up on you.
3.
We're either in for a big blow up or a big bliss out.
1.
You just saw our own countdown. Our Fox team caught the summer solstice on June 21st, a significant date leading up to what some say the Maya calendar marks as Doomsday. Hello, everyone. I'm Bill Hemmer, and welcome to our special presentation. It is a fact that the Maya calendar will end this coming December 21st of 2012, but don't believe the hype. We are certain the world is not going to end that day. Doomsday has been predicted by religions and cultures countless times, and when natural disasters strike, many feel it's a sign that the end must be close. On this program, we investigate our fascination with Doomsday. Why today has been pinned on the Maya? That's a mystery Adam Housley explores. At the battlefield of Armageddon, Lauren Green investigates the Book of Revelation's battle between good and evil and the belief that the second coming of Christ is imminent. And Amy Kellogg discovers what the Maya share with Neolithic builders of Stonehenge. But first, the mysterious Maya. We travel to the rainforests of southern Mexico and the jewel of the Maya classic period in Palenque.
Most of the Maya books, there were thousands of them at the time of the contact between the Spanish and the Maya, were burned by Spanish friars mostly because they were sacrilegious. There are five fragments that I know of that exist still to this day. They covered subjects like medicine, history, genealogy, astronomy, mathematics.
For the last several decades, intense focus has been put on the mysterious Maya culture that flourished as a sophisticated civilization between the 2nd through 9th century. Some say they were actually prophets of doom.
This was salvaged by accident almost.
Archaeologist Christopher Powell explains the importance of this broken tablet, simply known as Monument 6. And this is one of the few things that was salvaged.
There was some work by the Mexican government done there by archaeologists, and when they left, some of the locals started digging around as well and found this monument.
And this came from a small site?
A very small site that is mostly disturbed, destroyed really, by a cement factory. Almost all of the architecture has been ground up into gravel or cement. And the main body of the text broke off.
And only recently it's been able to be deciphered, right?
Yes,
so, I mean,
just
this
in
has
the
been
last
around
decade
for
or so.
40 years or so, but really only the last few years
Yeah,
we understand what it says.
Yes, this is what all the controversy is about. Unfortunately, you can see it's fairly heavily damaged at the very end. The famous end phrase that mentions the end of the 13 Baktuns that will terminate in December 21st, 2012.
According to the remaining piece of the tablet, something significant is going to happen. So basically, this is signifying a changeover.
The flavor of that event is what's missing from this text.
And it's this missing fragment that has also led to over 3,000 books that many claim to explain the true apocalyptic ending of the Maya calendar.
Over 200 million hits on Google, Maya 2012. When I started this 10 years ago, I'd get 10, 12,000, which was a lot for that day. So that's a magic word written on
Anthony Avini is professor of astronomy and anthropology at Colgate University and author of the book, The End of Time.
In the 1920s, it was the Egyptians. We were very well timed because that was the excavation of King Tut's tomb. The Maya today are center stage, and we're romancing them.
The Maya were a culture filled with fantastic legends, and some were complete hoaxes, like tales of powerful crystal skulls.
The Maya believed they lived in an animated universe consisting of frogs and people and plants and rocks and stars with whom they engaged in a dialogue.
They even practiced strange bloodletting sacrifices to thank their gods.
They would pierce themselves, the kings through the foreskins of their penises, the queens right through their tongues. They would run paper or cloth collecting the blood. Then they would collect those bloody pieces of paper and rope, place them in a ceramic dish, and burn them.
The Mayans were expert mathematicians and astronomers. Today, the solstice would have been a sacred day in their culture. Here at the ruins in southern Mexico of Palenque, there would have been all sorts of rituals, even human sacrifices. Odd rituals, buried complex calendars, strange hieroglyphic numbers. Were these symbols a message that the Maya left for us to decode a future apocalypse? So, speaking of that mystery, obviously when you have any kind of mystery, any kind of uncertainty, it can bring people out of the woodwork, so to speak.
Yes.
And we've seen that with the Mayans, right?
Oh, very much so.
The Doomsday
particularly
folks.
It's sort of a natural thing. You can trace that sort of behavior all through history. The change of the last 1000 AD in Europe, there was a lot of people thought it was the end.
Right now, end of the world predictions in 2012 include a collision with Planet X, or the Earth passing through the Milky Way galaxy, the eruption of destructive solar flares, tsunamis, asteroids, even the reversal of the North and South poles. All of them could have a devastating impact on our planet.
For example, today, if we could see the sun, some really interesting effects would occur at the Temple of the Inscriptions. Basically, one of the kings was probably presented there in a ray of light that came through a small window right at the setting of the sun on the solstice. We call it naked eye astronomy or horizon-based astronomy. It's just with forked sticks and strings. You can do an amazing amount of astronomy with just that. You need a nice flat surface that has a good view of the east and the west, where the planets and the sun and the moon all rise and set. So when the sun rises right here, 365 days from now, it's going to be right there again.
Pretty impressive for people that didn't have any instruments.
Well, the Maya didn't use any tool to keep record of the stars. It only was the direct observation of the movement of the stars.
Benito Venegas, a Mexican archaeologist, has worked on many sites of the Maya ruins.
Only the noble people, all the people related with the power, were the people who kept the record of these important dates.
They were able to envisage past and future skies. They were able to look ahead, and what they looked ahead to and found that was particularly significant in what we call the 21st of December 2012.
Graham Hancock is author of the book Fingerprints of the Gods.
With the Mayan calendar, it is possible to tell exactly what the phase of the moon will be on a particular day 2,000 years from now or 2,000 years before now.
The ancient Maya had a variety of calendars that ran on the cycle of the sun, the moon, and the visible planets. Why was the solstice important to the Maya?
The solstice is very important because they kept this record of the change of the seasons. So they can now know that the rainy season is going to begin, and for the construction of the buildings, they only use the great amount of labor of slaves. They don't have any tool, just the hammer and chisel.
There are flush toilets and sweat baths and soak baths there. There's an observatory. It was a private space. All indications it was a living space for the kings. The Temple of the Inscriptions, where this great king who ruled for 69 years is buried deep beneath it in a very elaborate tomb.
This is the Temple of the Inscriptions, the final resting place of Pakal the Great, the beloved Mayan king who reigned here for nearly 70 years. Under his rule, Mayan art, architecture, and astronomy flourished.
The way these sites are lined out, the way they interact with light and shadow on the solstices and the equinox and the zenith passages is turning out to be a very rich field of study right now.
There seems to have been an ancient idea, as above, so below, to bring down the perfection of the heavens to earth, and in some way to unite heavens and earth.
Around the world, there are other monuments aligned to the sun besides the ones here in Palenque, Mexico, including Stonehenge in England, the Great Pyramids of Egypt, and the temples at Angkor Wat in Cambodia.
What you find in all of these sites is an endeavor to align structures to the rising of the sun at one or other or several of those moments. Storytelling in ancient times often involved reference to the heavens and to celestial bodies, and I think that's what the Maya were doing.
There are even more discoveries hidden in the Mayan culture, language, science, and temples we have yet to see. When we return, Adam Housley uncovers mysteries about the Maya and why the obsession with the December 21st date.
I mean, all of this beautiful architecture you see, you're looking at about 7 or 8% of what's out there. If those trees weren't there, you'd see 1,000 structures stretching for over almost a mile out there that are completely buried in the jungle.
So are there more mysteries of the Maya still waiting to be discovered out there in the jungle?
At Palenque, we have architectural excellence. We have the longest hieroglyphics inscriptions here that are also very complex. They like to go way back into the mythological past, talk about the actions of the gods.
I think we're looking at a very different culture from ours that is doing things in very different ways and that regards as amongst its prime objectives a connection between earth and heaven, which is done through the medium of architecture and very precise astronomical observation. The Mayan calendar is itself a stunning technological device. It actually has a more accurate estimate of the length of the solar year than we use today in modern Western civilization.
It's really amazing when you think about it. You've got light. There were magicians with light. There were magicians with the seasons, with astronomy, with numerology, with geometry.
Yes.
I mean, look
Very
at this.
sophisticated civilization.
Yet mysterious.
And yes, it's mysterious because unlike a lot of the cultures in the Middle East and in Asia and in Europe, we've had less time to study the Maya. You know, it was discovered later. We have only recently, relatively since the mid-70s or so, been able to start reading their hieroglyphic language.
According to the decoders, the end of the Maya calendar, as calculated by the great Maya astronomers, will end on the winter solstice in 2012.
Well, there are a number of reasons why the Maya have come to center stage. The granddaddy of all Maya calculations, all Maya cycles, the 5,125-year cycle known as the long count, will overturn.
The last creation cycle began on 3,114 BC and will come to an end on 12/21/12, or what the Maya referred to as the 13th Baktun. The Maya long count calendar is often linked to the odometer of a car, clicking off one day at a time in endless cyclical succession.
There's a difference between your automobile and its odometer and the Maya odometer, and that is that when the odometer on your automobile goes over, your car is one step closer to the junkyard. Well, I think it's interesting that if you look at a wide sampling of these messages on the internet, you'll find that we're either in, on December the 21st, 2012, we're either in for a big blow up or a big bliss out. The blow up is the end of the world. As far as the bliss out is concerned, and I think these theories are weirder, they're really based on the second coming of Christ. So I think that American religion plays a very prominent role in this anticipation of the apocalypse.
Even the famous explorer Christopher Columbus believed his discovery of the New World was necessary in order to fulfill an ancient prophecy.
When Columbus came to the New World, he tells us in his diary, one of his major purposes was to make this place ready for the coming of the city of Zion. That is the second coming of Jesus.
People are, by nature, psychologically, storytellers. We all understand what it is to have a beginning and a middle and an end to a story.
Dr. Keith Ablow is a psychiatrist and Fox News contributor.
The Doomsday scenario is at odds, to my mind, with religion, because in fact, it is an anesthetic. It relieves people of needing to take the journey towards self.
The 2012 Doomsday sensation embraces a range of eschatological or end-of-time beliefs, clearly suggesting a cataclysmic or transformative event will occur on December 21st, 2012. So how did this phenomenon get started?
The idea of a Maya doomsday has been around for at least 25, 30, 40 years, and now, of course, it builds to a crescendo as the date approaches. Blame it on the internet, because the internet is the analog of the old tent meetings that used to be held in the 19th century, where people would gather under a big tent and some preacher would tell them about Jesus coming to earth.
The end attracts our attention. We want to try to forecast what's going to happen. Forecasting is a big part of the human condition.
The Maya were a thoughtful civilization that flourished during Europe's Dark Ages. So why did they abandon their great cities and appear to vanish from the face of the earth?
For some mysterious reason, possibly connected with something as simple as a 100-year drought, Maya civilization collapsed less than, a little bit more than 1,000 years ago.
The king cannot give the item that the people needs to live, so the people abandon these big cities. They go to the countryside.
One of the reasons why these sites were abandoned so easily at the end of the ninth Baktun was once it became unwieldy, once it was too much work to keep these cities going, once they got too big and they were destroying too much of the forest to maintain them, it was easy for the Maya to leave, to pack up and leave. They were self-sufficient anyways.
We look far away for the answers, and so maybe the aliens will help us. Maybe the ancient Maya had words that will help us.
So here, deep within the hot and steamy Mexican jungle, we find the mysteries of the Maya. We go from here in Yashtilan to my colleague Lauren Green in Israel.
Solstice celebrations here in Israel at Megiddo are few and far between. But if you're a Christian looking for Doomsday, go no further. This is the site of Armageddon, the end of time's battle between good and evil. That story coming up next.
From the ruins of the Maya culture to the other side of the world in Rome, marking time is universal no matter where you are. And in St. Peter's Square, an 83-foot sundial that sits outside the basilica, brought over from Egypt in the year 37 AD. Shadows indicate midday on these granite markers embedded in the square of this holy site. Nearly every religion, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, they all have a fascination with the apocalypse. Christians prophesize about the end of time in the Holy Scripture. Lauren Green reports.
Christians mark the end of time in the final chapter of the Bible's New Testament, the book of Revelation. Chapter 11, verse 18 reads, "Now is the time to destroy those who destroy the earth."
The book is not about destruction. It's not about a wrathful God. It is about consequences.
Greek Orthodox priest Father Mark Airy translated the book from its original Greek text. He collaborated with a Hollywood writer and Christian illustrator to publish a new graphic novel that helps readers visualize the final chapter.
What we're trying to do is we're trying to get people to see the book of Revelation in a new way. Not just read it, but see it. All we're trying to do is to present it in its full message of hope in God and hope for the future.
How likely is it that John would have been concerned about the end times?
The Apostle John was the last of the 12 disciples of Jesus alive when he wrote it. Here's a church which is expecting its Lord to come back, but he hasn't come back yet. And so there's this yearning in the community and this suffering. And from the island of Patmos, the Apostle John received a revelation from God that he wrote down as he was instructed to, and that revelation was disseminated.
John's revelation was received through angels in a dramatic vision while he was held captive by the Romans for preaching the Gospels. Jews were also at odds with their pagan rulers who tried to destroy them during the first century.
The majority believed it was so unlivable now here on this earth. With conquerors and economics, everything was going wrong.
Professor James Charlesworth is a biblical scholar who studies ancient apocalyptic writings.
Why do people turn to apocalyptic thought? That is, because they can't find meaning here. And the meaning has to be there because the human cannot exist without some kind of hope.
Just over 60 years ago, the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. The earliest copies of the Hebrew Bible were found from a sect of Jews called the Essenes, who copied the ancient manuscripts in the first century.
They were copied here. Our earliest copies are from here.
The Ten Commandments were among the documents.
The people living here believed they were living in the end time.
Professor Charlesworth, also a Dead Sea Scrolls scholar, showed us where the Essenes wrote their predictions in Qumran along the Dead Sea.
The world here at Qumran ended in doom in June of 68 because you had an invincible army, Roman army.
The Romans destroyed the temple. More than 1 million Jews were killed.
So John is trying to reveal and to give meaning to their suffering and to their difficulties, and I think the book of Revelation can do that for every generation.
We visited the site of Armageddon, where John's revelation sets the stage for end times.
Most people don't realize that Armageddon is a real place. It's Megiddo.
Archaeologist Eric Klein has been excavating Megiddo since 1994.
I really do think it's the most blood-soaked area on Earth. We've had 34 battles here in the last 4,000 years.
Why would John, the author of Revelation, place the Doomsday battle to end all battles here at Armageddon?
By the time that John was living, there had already been, say, 12 or 13 battles fought here. And he would have known about those, especially the biblical ones. King Saul and his son Jonathan fought Mount Gilboa just down the road. Greeks fight here.
Many people mistakenly think that Armageddon is the site of the final battle.
Armageddon is not the final battle. The final battle is supposed to be fought at Jerusalem 1,000 years later. There are some people that say that Armageddon already happened and that we're now in that period of the 1,000 years between Armageddon and the final battle. You get all kinds of religious disputes.
I believe that God gave us the book of Revelation as a warning.
Evangelical broadcaster Marcus Lamb of Daystar Network sees some signs Jesus predicted in Matthew that are unfolding today.
Well, it's unprecedented, the amount of famine and poverty and wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes that the earth has had collectively. We are living in the end times. Revelations 20 about the battle of Gog and Magog is referring to Russia, that the great bear will attack Israel, but will also have other allies. Iran will be one of those. The Bible describes that there's going to be so much bloodshed that the blood will rise as high as the horse's bridle. Many people believe that there is a rapture, that Jesus will appear in the clouds and that the Christians from all over the world will be taken up into the heavens, and then there will be a 7-year period called the tribulation period. And at the end of that 7 years, the battle of Armageddon, then Jesus will come back and he will stand upon the Mount of Olives, and after that, the 1,000-year reign of Christ on the earth.
Lamb says Daystar will be there to capture the second coming.
We have a live 24-hour camera feed that anytime, day or night, people can go on our website, and when the end comes, Daystar will be there.
Some people will say it's going to happen on this date and this is how it's going to happen. The text is not that detailed.
You make an unscholarly yet most welcome prediction about who will win the battle of good and evil.
I do believe that good is going to win. That's not just because I'm hopeful, but because history has shown this.
No one really knows if or even how the end will come, while doomsday believers have made a cottage industry out of scaring people with apocalyptic predictions. Some claim hard science is behind their calculations. You'll be surprised to hear what's really behind all the doom and gloom. That's next. December 21st, 2012 is the winter solstice, or what some people call Doomsday. 6 months before that day was the summer solstice, and thousands of yoga lovers were celebrating at the crossroads of the world in New York City's Times Square. These people's state of mind was literally a far stretch from fearful doomsdayers. Here's a look now at why predictions of destruction are simply myth.
There's nothing in the Mayan calendar to suggest that gigantic floods and earthquakes are going to destroy our world.
There are no prophecies that say the world's going to end.
I think what we're dealing with here to some extent is the denial of our own deaths.
This obscure relic, Tortuguero Monument 6, is the focus of the Maya countdown to Doomsday. Worn, damaged, incomplete, the strange glyphs translate as the end date of the calendar and a suggestion that something will happen.
But there is no evidence the Maya were counting down to doomsday.
The cataclysmic view is not really borne out by what we know about the Maya. They looked at cycles that went way beyond the 2012 date.
We were involved this past summer in the discovery of some amazing Maya inscriptions from the ruins of Xultun in Guatemala, which show computations of numbers longer than the long count cycle. So, I mean, there's a number that projects into the future 1,000 years from today.
Such recent discoveries have not halted speculation about the end of the Maya calendar.
I think stories like this get started because we see that the ancient scripts are ambiguous and there's wiggle room. And it means that somebody has a bright idea and says, hey, I can make money filling in the dots.
Why don't we look at the evidence about what the Maya say? And all 500 some carved stelae or monuments are really about dynastic history. From what we can read is that cycles overturn, they're endless, and an old cycle begets a new cycle, and we all try harder.
As a physicist, I have one word for those people who are concerned about doomsday: relax.
Physicist Michio Kaku says the disaster scenarios are often based on scientific fact.
When people first hear about pole reversal, they think, oh my God, the poles are going to flip just like this.
But not all the facts.
No, we're not talking about a geologic pole shift. At worst, we're talking about perhaps a wandering of the magnetic North Pole. But it takes thousands of years to millions of years for that wandering to take place.
Some say the government is hiding the truth.
I love the secrets that are always involved here. A secret hidden planet, which of course the government never tells us about. That's conspiracy theory.
But December 21st is special. On that day, the end of the Maya calendar, there will be a rare celestial event, one that could have been predicted by the Maya astronomers.
If you look at the map of the sky on December the 21st, 2012, well, Jupiter is here, and Saturn is here, and the Earth is here, so there is a lineup.
But this galactic alignment does not mean doom.
The sun and the moon are the primary forces that raise tides on the Earth, that try to pull the Earth apart. What's the next highest tide-raising force? Turns out to be the planet Venus. Do you know how much of a tide the planet Venus produces? 1/500th of an inch.
The people who are taking the Mayan calendar's expiration, quote unquote, seriously as the end of the world are people who are vulnerable to being co-opted by a story bigger than them.
In 1997, 38 members of the Heaven's Gate cult thought a UFO would rescue them from doomsday. Their ticket to the spaceship? Suicide. An extreme example, but Abloh says thoughts of doomsday may be comforting, but not in a healthy way.
It's much easier to live with a fear about the end of the world that's going to wipe everybody off the planet than to say, what am I really anxious about? What are the roots of my fears? How do I conquer those? There's no asteroid coming, but what are our calamities? What are our ends of time? Cancer, cardiac disease, diabetes, car accidents. We hang by threads. Bottom line is, the denial of death fuels a lot of myth.
Well, I take a controversial view, and mainstream historians would not agree with me.
While not predicting doom, Graham Hancock sides with those who do predict a change for our civilization.
I see in the Mayan calendar, somehow mysteriously, I don't know how they did it, but they seem to have connected and plugged into cycles in the human story. The Mayan calendar is not saying the end of the world. It's saying the end of a chapter of the human story. We can see the birth of a new consciousness taking place all around the world today.
Now that we know the Maya never had a countdown to doomsday, Graham Hancock and others still believe there's a countdown to the end of the world as we know it. Coming up, an inside look at a unique group of people who are seriously worried about surviving catastrophic events. Plus, we counted down to doomsday by catching different celebrations of the summer solstice, like the one here at Stonehenge. Thousands gathered to celebrate, and we were there. The mystery behind this prehistoric site is next. Our team has covered the countdown to doomsday and the summer solstice in Palenque, Mexico, Megiddo, Israel, and here in New York. But one of the oldest structures aligned to the sun is found outside of London, England. From southern Mexico to the rising sun in the English countryside, the solstice celebration at Stonehenge was perhaps the most revealing to all of us. Our Amy Kellogg uncovers that mystery.
The times change, but the sky remains the same. Neolithic people, the last of the Stone Age era, lived on Earth approximately 5,500 to 2,500 BC. That's thousands of years before the Maya even came on the scene. But both the Maya and these early farmers held sacred rituals to honor the sun on the same day, the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. Fast forward a few thousand years to present-day Stonehenge on Salisbury Plain, England, summer solstice 2012.
For the longest day, we will party and play.
Do these modern-day Druids, pagans, and all-around revelers look like they're preparing for the end of the world?
Basically, we believe that really the Mayans ought to start a new calendar. We certainly don't believe that it's the end of the world as far as Druids and pagans are concerned.
There's no Doomsday, love. I'm seeing 2013 in.
Stonehenge ceased to be a ceremonial spot of its original function thousands of years ago, but because of the mystery surrounding it, its spirituality, and its alignment with the sun on the days of the summer and winter solstice, it's an enduring gathering point for Latter-day Druids.
Stonehenge is many things to many different people.
Peter Carson, head of Stonehenge for English Heritage, explains why this place is so special.
Some people see it as an astronomical calendar. For others, it's a change. It signifies the change in the seasons. To others, it's a ceremonial place where ancestors were buried or cremated.
Nobody knows with certainty how or why it was built. It is a megalithic mystery.
The problem with cultures, certainly the Neolithic cultures of Europe 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, is they didn't leave us any written records.
I mean, it's a prehistoric culture. That means before writing. And you have to interpret the artifacts, the alignments, and so on.
What we do know is that Stonehenge is aligned with several celestial bodies. The rising sun at the summer solstice attracts the biggest crowds today. Its magic endures.
So Peter, what happens at sunrise with the heel stone and the alignment?
Well, what people try and do, and whilst there's only a limit to the number of people that can get inside the stone circle, is to observe the sun rising over the heel stone and shoot all the way down right into the centre of the stone circle.
The picture we get from excavations that have been made, studying the tools, knowing a little something about the farming methods, is that these people were rather sophisticated.
Archaeologists believe Stonehenge was built in stages, anywhere from 3,000 to 2,000 BC.
The stones on top, they are not just placed on top erratically. There is a ball and socket, so the engineering qualities and prowess of our ancestors is quite remarkable.
The picture of the Neolithic people that we used to have, of a, what shall we call them, shambling, sniveling, slobbering a group of individuals like cave people, is totally wrong. The brain was the same size as it is today.
Stonehenge is not unique. It's part of a pattern of what we call megalithic structures, not only throughout the UK, but throughout Europe and indeed all over the world.
Those who build magnificent works of architecture, be they the pyramids of Egypt, Angkor Wat in Southeast Asia, or the Maya temples or Stonehenge, we want to make a statement, and it's usually the ruler who makes that statement.
But is it coincidence that all of them are aligned with the sun and other celestial bodies?
I think that people look for truth in the sky because it is the most pristine aspect of nature, more accurate than the weather. So when the Pleiades rise in the east at sunset, farmers know it's time to start thinking about harvesting the crop.
The calendar is the common theme found throughout all ancient societies. All of them discovered the calendar, and that's what Stonehenge is.
While the celestial alignments of Stonehenge, like others around the world, mark the planting and harvesting seasons, the builders of these monuments probably had other reasons for their incredible efforts.
They can harvest the crop anyway, but religion needs that.
What we do need stone circles for is to revere our connection with the universe. Ancient cultures did have reverence for the universe. They saw the sun as a god.
This is certainly a religious sanctuary, Stonehenge. There's no question about it. At Stonehenge, the sun was revered. If I were the head chief, I would have seen to it that that alignment was precise, because I could then stand at the center with my acolytes and point to it and say, do you see our God rising? Our God who gave rise to me.
That's similar to the Maya king being illuminated by the sun on the summer solstice.
The gods were communicating with us mortals through the sun.
Stonehenge is one of the more mysterious places you'll find anywhere in the world. And coming up here, you'll meet some fascinating people who are learning survival skills, stockpiling food and building bunkers. Find out if they know something we don't. Prepping for Doomsday is next. Remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, Y2K, 9/11, Katrina? Those were events that felt like the end of the world was coming. In these uncertain times, there are people who are worried about other kinds of doomsdays, and they plan on surviving.
It looks like there's just been another series of attacks, cyber attacks on major United States banks.
Recent cyber attacks on some large U.S. financial institutions could have doomsday-style consequences, and that has our government concerned.
Attackers could also seek to disable or degrade critical military systems and communication networks. The collective result of these kinds of attacks could be a cyber Pearl Harbor.
We have an insane regime in Iran run by people who are psychotic, who may get the nuclear weaponry to act on their insane thoughts. That means we could have a nuclear holocaust.
The preppers that we depict on our show have a variety of disaster scenarios that they're concerned about. Everything from tsunami, earthquake, nuclear blast.
Alan Madison is co-executive producer of Doomsday Preppers, a reality program on the National Geographic Channel at 9 p.m. on Tuesday nights.
There are 3 touchstones for many of the preppers in terms of events that happened in our history. The first touchstone is 9/11. The second touchstone is the destruction of American City, which is Katrina. And the third touchstone that I always hear them talk about, of course, is the financial collapse.
While most households have enough supplies for a few days, real preppers are moving to remote locations, learning survival skills, stockpiling food and medicine, anticipating a catastrophic event.
They're the opposite of the Mayan calendar people, who have no particular investment in reality.
Every preparation that the preppers on our show think about are also being thought of at a governmental or worldwide level. And the seed bank is one of them.
Believing that radioactive fallout from Japan will contaminate the American food chain, Preston is creating a seed bank, a store of fruit and vegetable seeds that can be used to grow radiation-free food in a post-apocalyptic world.
A non-prepper might look at my supplies and say, "Are you kidding me?" But if something happens, I win this game. People that aren't prepared, they lose this game.
On a much larger scale, built to withstand an earthquake and a nuclear strike, the Global Seed Vault, located in Norway, about 800 miles from the North Pole, stores about 750,000 different crop varieties.
I think the thinking and the logic of the seed bank is valid. It's sound. Why not have an insurance policy just in case? However, the bad side of it is it could take off. People could think, oh my God, why are they doing this? They're doing this because they know something that we don't know, that perhaps there is a doomsday coming.
But the doomsday prepper concept is not entirely new. In the late 1950s, our government actually had a secret Cold War fallout shelter built in West Virginia for the entire U.S. Congress.
We have preppers who are extraordinarily wealthy who are preparing for the end of the world.
Big Al is a musician from Nashville, Tennessee, who's been prepping for a nuclear war with Russia for the last 35 years. But he's concerned his elaborate bunker may not be deep enough underground to shield him from deadly gamma radiation after a nuclear blast. To ensure his safety, Big Al's purchased a salvaged fuel tank to serve as an annex gamma ray shelter.
Man, ain't that pretty?
Y2K was, for many of the preppers who I speak to, a turning point where they started to prep.
Just before the Millennium celebration in 2000, there was concern about our technology crashing.
The Y2K fiasco, in some sense, had a silver lining to it because of the fact that so many people were concerned about the switching of the calendar and the fact that there could be computer glitches, meant that top programmers were assigned to ferret out all the possible glitches.
David Sardi is a disabled truck driver.
I'm preparing for an electromagnetic pulse that will disable the transportation system of the United States.
Of all the doomsday scenarios, there actually is one kind of incident which we have to be careful about, and that's a gigantic solar storm when the sun has a temper tantrum.
It would be like somebody instantly flipped a switch on the world. This is where one of those EMP events would come from. This is live right now. The last few days, it's putting out a lot of flares, but right now we're getting a lot of electrical interference. If one of those pops out at Earth, that's when things go bad.
In 1859, an EMP in the form of a solar flare hit the United States and Europe. Nicknamed the Carrington event, it caused an almost worldwide failure of the telegraph system, one of the few electronic technologies of the day.
If it were to happen today, it would literally throw us back maybe 100 years into the past, before the coming of the space age and electricity and the internet. But it's not doomsday. Even another Carrington event will not destroy life on Earth, but it could send us back 100 years into the past.
While some of you may continue to prepare for survival, there will not be a Doomsday December 21st. So we hope you have a great first day of the rest of your lives on December 22nd. 12/22/2012. Thank you for watching our special presentation. I'm Bill Hemmer.